Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Complain about me logging into my phone 30 seconds late? I'll work my hours but cost you money." My first job out of bar school was with an ambulance chasing firm. I worked 12 to 8 p.m. in the call center calling people after accidents to get them to sign with us for a personal injury claim. Officially, this was not cold calling, as the details were passed to us by insurance companies who assured us that each lead had confirmed injuries and asked to speak to a lawyer. I have my doubts over how truthful the insurers were after a number of people I called denied any injury, or seemed surprised to be contacted by a solicitor's firm. But that is not the cause of the story. I was very good at my job. Our target was for 10 new claims a day, so if you got a car with driver and passenger in the front and 3 kids in the back, you were laughing, as that one call was half your quota. Many colleagues would go onto a go slow once they had their 10, but I kept busy. If nothing else, it was boring there when not working and time dragged, and would average about 25 new clients a day. After 6 months, we get a new manager in the call center. I'm of those micromanager types, which is a style I do not respond well to. I start getting emails saying things like, "You were 30 seconds, 1 minute and 23 seconds late logging into the system today. Make sure you stay late by that much time." Now I should point out that up until now I logged out at the end of my shift bang on time, unless I was on a call, in which case I would finish it, and if this was a call with 5 people in, you could be stuck for another 45 minutes. We also had to turn the computers off at the end of the day, easy, hit shut down and walk off, and turn them on at the start of our shift. The computers being slow, this could take 5 minutes before you could log into the call system. I responded to the first few emails pointing out that logging into the call system 30 seconds late meant I had actually turned the computer on, which was technically part of my job, about 4.5 minutes before my shift started, and I stayed late regularly to finish calls. The manager told me that the time to turn on the computer was not part of my job and had to be ready to make calls bang on 12. I contacted HR and they reluctantly agreed that turning on the computer was one of our duties, and therefore we only needed to be in ready to press the power button at 12. New manager was not easily beaten though. He started buying the time we got to our desks, and then, as is always the case when relying on public transport, if you were a few seconds or minutes late, he'd send the email telling you to work the extra time at the end of your shift. I decided that I had had enough of this, and so I decided to work to rule. I stopped trying to get new clients after hitting my 10 for the day and would play on the internet unless getting an incoming call from someone responding to a voicemail. I wouldn't make any outgoing calls after hitting the daily target. I also decided that if I was on a call at 8 p.m. I would simply tell the potential client, "My shift has now finished," hang up and turn the computer off. I did this for a week and encouraged others to do it. When the weekly stats hit my boss' desk, he realized we were about a third down in terms of clients secured compared to other weeks. He called us into a meeting with his head of department and bollocked us all, asking why we were all lazy and not securing clients. Screaming about us hanging up on clients. I just said, "You told us you wanted us to work as required by the contract, down to the second, that's all we're doing. Do you not like it?" A few weeks later he was gone and a much more sensible manager moved in. Things went back to the way they were. I ended up staying at the firm for 7 years, although only in the call center for 9 months before moving on to case handling and then trial work. The next one is titled, "The form says you must inspect all donations." I will give all people, entities names that correspond with their function within this story. Years ago I started a new job. I'm a biology professor, and this job was at a small, private college. Note, as this is important and people sometimes confuse these terms, private is not the same as for profit. Private just means that we aren't operated by the state. Like most colleges, we're a non-profit. This college is also located within easy driving distance of a branch of a large state university. One of the first things I do is get us some free stuff. We have a lot of out-of-date equipment, analog when everyone has moved to digital, and a lot less glassware, beakers, etc. than we need. Some of my grad school buddies work at large state university nearby, so I call them up and ask if anyone is clearing out their lab. See, at a lot of these universities, when faculty leave or retire, anything left in their lab that isn't cutting edge and super expensive goes into state surplus. There are only two legal ways that I know of to avoid sending things to surplus: move it to someone else in the department or donate it to a nonprofit. It turns out that I actually know the person who all of this equipment goes to, after being picked over in-house, to be surplused, and so she lets me come by her storage space and pick through it next. Great story, right? I solve a problem for us, and large state university saves time and looks generous. Of course, that's not the end of this, or it wouldn't belong here. It turns out that I am unaware of two things. First, by doing this I have just made someone senior to me, but not in my command chain, look incompetent. This isn't hard, since that's the truth. Second, one of the reasons we seem not to have replaced things in a while is that there were, several years before I came, some major financial shenanigans. The sort where senior people resign, effective immediately, and the locks on their office doors get changed overnight. Because of the second point, paperwork has been created to document all sorts of transactions around the college. I don't know that this is helpful paperwork, since the sorts of transactions I'm about to describe weren't part of the financial shenanigans, but as we know from thermodynamics, once useful work is converted into paperwork, it can never be converted back into useful work again. Needless to say, senior professor complains to my department chair that I haven't filled out the donation paperwork, and so I'm violating our financial transparency obligations, and basically just Satan, etc. It probably doesn't help that senior professor also has the sort of attitude towards paperwork that leads me to suspect that instead of pets she just has stacks of compliance forms lying around her house. My department chair, the person who could actually fire me, gives me the forms and asks that I fill them out appropriately. One item on this form is an estimate of the financial size of the gift. Obviously, if you're donating a few $1,000s to the university, which is probably what the form is actually for, you just write down the amount. For physical items you need to estimate their value. I have a box of random equipment, I know more are coming, and I don't want to waste time looking up every piece of equipment, writing the price down, calculating some sort of reasonable discount because it's used items, and putting the full, itemized list in the space available. Still not the real malicious compliance here, but I ducked this one. I didn't donate anything, I say. My chair is confused. But you came in with this box of glassware and told everyone in the department to come get what they needed from it. Me, right. But that's a donation from large state university to our college, not to me. I just drove it here out of the goodness of my heart. If they donated it to me personally, that would be illegal, since they're required to donate it to a non-profit. My chair, who came from industry and has a bit more business sense than some pure researchers, understands that this is correct. However, I can see that there is a problem coming. The next set of things I want to get are some decent animal skulls. We have about 3 species on hand, one of them human. Everywhere else I've taught we generally have at least a dozen species on hand, and it's very useful when you are teaching anything that involves comparative anatomy. But my plan has been to use my own skills to clean the skulls of road-killed animals. That will be a donation from me, every time, and I don't want to do this paperwork. It's now Christmas, and I'm visiting with some of my wife's friends back home. They are reminded that I'm a biologist, and walk me out into the woods where they show me a deer skull. It's been there for years, we never had a use for it. It's yours if you want it. It's a doe, no antlers, which is what most people want, but for scientific purpose that's fine, and we don't have one at work. I take it. Several weeks later all the relevant parties are back on campus. I wrap up the skull in a plastic grocery bag and take it in to donate. A note about old skulls, in case, for some reason, you don't have a career where you need to age skeletal elements by looking at them. Mammal skulls are made from many separate bones that fuse together at the edges. As a skull ages outside in the elements, many of these sutures open. This means that a skull that has been sitting outside for long enough is extremely dirty. The dirt is just dirt, since maggots and other flesh-eating insects pick every scrap of flesh away, but an item full of crevice sitting on dirt with leaves falling on it picks up a lot of debris. If you don't know anything about old skulls, you, rather naturally, assume that this debris is rotting flesh. The bag is there to contain this dirt. I need the donation form, I tell our administrative assistant. She gives me the form, I walk back to my office, and I carefully fill it out. Where it says, value of donation, I fill in, $0. This is important. I technically don't need to fill out this paperwork if the item is worthless, but I need to fill out the paperwork because I need to present the paperwork, and the item, to our financial department so that they can verify that the item is worthless and that I didn't need to do the paperwork. A brilliant, well-designed system, as you can see. I ask our administrative assistant where the financial office is, since I'm still new enough that I don't really know. She tells me where, but says she has to go to that building anyway, and she'd be happy to take the paperwork and item with her. I say thanks, but no thanks, I'm taking it over now. I walk into the financial office. Everyone has a fancy nameplate, a desk with neatly marked trays for incoming and outgoing forms, and everyone seems to be dressed like someone had said, dress like you handle money all day, but actually buy everything from Walmart. Thankfully, the nameplates include job titles, so I walk over to the person who needs to validate my claims. What's this about? She asks. I have this donation for the biology department, and I've been told I need to fill out this paperwork. And that you need to see the item. That's correct, she says, taking the paperwork from me. She starts to read, frowning like she might be about to accuse me of fraud. It's quite possible that, contrary to her parents' instructions, she made that face for so long that it has frozen this way. And this is the item, I say, reaching into a ratty plastic bag and pulling out the skull. The nose, pointed towards her, is a gaping hole with thin bones called turbinates winding back into the recesses of the skull. There's also a leaf, wedged into the nose somehow out in the woods. A chunk of dirt drops from the inside of the brain case and falls to the floor. What is that? She says, clearly thrown off her routine. I have learned that most people find that most mammal skulls look the same, even though to me they look very different. A deer skull, I say. It was found in the woods by friends of mine. Here, take a look. I helpfully extend the skull towards her. A trickle of debris loosens itself from the back of the eye socket and rattles off the papers on her desk. I can see her cringe. I've assessed its value at $0, but I was told that you needed to personally inspect items to make sure of this. I turn the skull over in my hands as I say this, still holding it out in presentation mode, as if I thought that she couldn't properly assess its value without examining the strange brown stain on the bone that once formed the roof of the mouth. I agree with that assessment, she says, quite rapidly. At this point I relent slightly and pull the skull back towards my chest so it is no longer extended over her desk. I casually fish a partial leaf from a suture in the top surface of the skull and drop it in the plastic bag I brought. I have a few more of these coming, I mention. I'll be cleaning those myself, so they'll be in better shape. Possibly more organic material left on them, though. Will you be needing to see those as well? No, she says, quite definitively. So, just to get this straight, you, as a representative of our financial office, are telling me that all donations of such biological specimens are worth $0 and you do not want to see them or the accompanying paperwork? Yes, she says. I stick the skull back into its traveling bag, and, as a gesture of goodwill, sweep some debris off her desk into the bag as well. It's a deal. The next one is titled, Manager Tries to Micromanage Me. I micro-employee them. A few years back, I worked in finance for a big brand. My department was the weird one. We would do all sorts of different things from customer complaints to cash collection and accounting. My manager, N+2, was an expert in her field and was very demanding. I was in charge of the biggest portfolio in the team and was quite busy every day. To top it off, every day you were assigned an inbox and were supposed to keep it up to date 24 hours reply time max. This is where the micromanagement starts. Manager would regularly go through the inboxes and ask people through IM to deal with this or that email first as it was urgent. Still don't how she would decide which emails were more important because it was pretty much always the same queries, but hey. And you had to drop anything and deal with her request immediately. One day though, I get 5 different requests from her in the span of 5 minutes. No problem for me, I take the first one and work my way through them chronologically. Suddenly, an IM comes through, did you take care of request N degree 4? I reply that I'm not there yet because I'm still on N degree 3. It was like 10 minutes after she sent those requests and while easy, they still needed investigation. She tells me that I need to do N degree 4 as soon as possible and she shouldn't even have to tell me. Basically, I had to read her mind to know which one she wanted handled first. Being no psychic, I decided to do the next best thing. Ask her what she needed me to do first. I would check my inbox for the day, select the most sensitive emails and ask her which one she needed me to handle first. Did that for a week and got told to deal with the inboxes I would normally do. The next one is titled, Dissolve my department, demote me and expect the same output? You got it, boss. I work in a highly specialized field, where it's very difficult to find and train suitable personnel. By pinching pennies and not holding his promises about pay grade changes, my boss successively drove away the 3 specialists working in the department I led. Right before the last one put in her notice, he argued that a 2-person department didn't justify a leadership position and demoted me, and we were integrated, on paper, to another department. This was done outside of any legal framework and with a 1-week notice, which is illegal. During the reorganization, the manager of the department we joined was assigned to R&D, and another manager and his deputy promoted to lead the department's daily business. We effectively had no less than 3 supervisors, all of them lacking managerial training and technical knowledge about the duties of our now defunct department, and only one of them can read the language in which 50% of our reports are written. Right after the reorganization, I was granted one last meeting with the boss, where I pointed out that several of my duties cannot be bestowed upon the mere foot soldier I had become, nor taken over by the new leadership. He answered that his decision was final. I was to revert to my previous job description and take up any future matter with my new supervisors. I did just that, and some more. I read the state law and ordinance about state and university employees, should have done it earlier, in hindsight. I discovered that 1. The illegal move by my boss doesn't carry any penalty, so there's duck all I can do legally. 2. I'm allowed to take on private mandates for anything that is not explicitly mentioned in my job description. It's a gift normally meant for professors. 3. I get to take up to 15 days of additional paid leave per year to hold a public office. 4. The pay grade 1 reverted to doesn't match my responsibilities today, even excluding the absence of leadership position, and there's an independent procedure with state HR to reevaluate the pay grade. The kicker? My old job description that dates back to 7 years before is short, to say the least, 3 lines that don't even cover 50% of what my duties in the last 7 years consisted of. And I have a side gig as a retained firefighter and fire instructor for which I used to take vacation days. This counts as a public office according to state law. The fallout. My new managers both signed the authorization to take on private mandates and public office without understanding the implications. I used all of the 15 days, where I legally get paid by the FD and my employer at the same time. I took on several private mandates totaling nearly an additional month of salary for 4 days of work. And the pay grade reevaluation has brought me back to the same income as with the previous leadership position. Oh, and since my specialty now has a bus factor of 1 and my new supervisors have been unable to staff the open positions, it was very unlucky that I fell ill at the time where I had to submit paperwork for a research grant, costing the institution $30,000 in lost research funds. Edit. I used the expression, private mandate, which is a direct translation of the state law legalese and seems to confuse a lot of you. Think of it as taking the contract in my name, as opposed to in the institution's name, and working on it outside of my regular hours. It's not exactly like a contractor though, because as a member of the institution, I'm still bound by some rules that don't apply to contractors. It is very weird and would not be possible if the transition had been planned and managed properly, with an update of my job description for example. DIF3R explained it well. Faculty at universities will sometimes consult on the side. I've heard of engineering and marketing professors doing design or doing research and writing internal white papers for companies before. Or collaborating on a research project under their own name, lab, as opposed to the university's brand. Edit 2. Some of you were hung up on the Lost Research Fund, so I want to clarify two things. 1. This was no part of the MC and I really caught a potentially serious disease. But since I had been warning for months about the lack of substitution or cross-training, this came as a vindication. 2. No grad student or junior researchers were impacted. It just erased part of what the institution gained in not staffing the open positions. The last one is titled, "You Want an Update Every Hour? You'll Get an Update." This is my best friend's story and I have her full permission to post it. A decade ago, we graduated high school in 2010. Because of how the high school system works in Quebec, graduation happens in grade 11. This meant that despite the legal drinking age of 18, we were all underage and still 17 years old. For our graduation party, we purchased a club package as a grade to go to a club per bar in Montreal, which we did not live in. Our parents were the Christian, controlling type. Admittedly, we hid a lot from them and certainly didn't tell them what was going on. My best friend, let's call her Sam, had a mother who was particular about this celebration. The mother knew we would be taking a bus into Montreal, staying with a friend and most likely partying our new freedom. So she demanded something from Sam. She demanded an update every hour. She wanted a text to give her these updates. Let me be clear that we were responsible kids. Got good grades, did after-school activities, were relatively liked, and didn't get in trouble. Sam decided to give her mother what she wanted, with a bit of extra. She set an alarm for every 5 minutes. And as soon as we got on that bus, she started texting. I'm sitting. We are turning a corner. We stopped at a light. We are driving. My ass is asleep. It took about 2 hours of texts every 5 minutes for her mum to give in. The explosion of texts was expensive 10 years ago. Her mother asked for an update to make sure she arrived safely in Montreal and at the end of the night. Thanks for listening.